Particularly on survival, you do not really want weapons like a missile launcher or Fat Man. The Fat Man can sometimes at least do a little bit of appreciable damage, but it's still not worth it compared to other weapons. On the other hand, you've got the missile launcher, which is so awful. The missile launcher sucks because no matter what, you're carrying ammo that costs or has 7 weight. The Fat Man's nukes have 12. And a missile launcher does essentially the same damage as a Gauss rifle, which has much lighter ammo. So there's no reason to use a missile launcher. Adding to that, the explosive effect of the minigun makes for a weapon that carries very low weight ammo, and it's just very cheap and economical to use 5mm ammo and the minigun. With the tri-barrel, its range is almost like a sniper rifle, especially since VATS allows you to shoot at enemies from a distance and just target them. And there's something about the minigun that with the tri-barrel, it's liberal, but the explosive shot makes it so that even if you miss an enemy, it'll still hit somewhere, and the damage from the area of effect will kill them alone. What I mean to say by liberal is that, like, the shooting range, like, even if you spray it and you miss, it'll give you a chance to still kill the enemy. That's compounded by the fact that VATS allows you to do critical hits, which will shoot an enemy down no matter what. If they're through a wall, sometimes it'll do it. It's perfect. Now, I can discuss why certain legendary effects aren't good. For example, any effect that does damage against a different or particular group, like assassins, is inferior to what 2-shot can do, because 2-shot can do more than 50% extra damage. So that's the issue with assassins. Now there's berserkers for melee weapons, and it does more damage the lower the player character's armor resistance is. So if you have 0 resistance, you get 200% damage. That may be good damage, but you sacrifice, I guess, your armor rating, and now you're relegated to being very susceptible to being killed. Now there's an effect from Far Harbor called blazing, and when you block, it has 25% chance to set attackers on fire. Only works for melee enemies like animals or enemies using melee weapons, and it's a 25% chance when they block to do extremely marginal damage. There's one perk called Bloodied. Bloodied actually does have some appeal because you can use it in combination with Rad powered. So I would recommend this on melee weapons, because then you will have plus 95% damage at 5% health, but you might more realistically have it near 80. Now there's another effect that's like Sentinel called Cavaliers, and it does the same thing except when you're blocking or sprinting, but you can't always be sprinting or blocking, so it's not as good to protect you. You can always stand and fight in the same position and do well, even as a melee character. There's an effect called Charged from Far Harbor, and it does 10% chance to deal 100 electrical damage on a successful block. I think that this perk is the same as Blazing. 10% chance, and you're dealing low damage. There's Crippling, which does 50% more limb damage, but Explosive is better because it'll cripple enemies either way with the concussive effects of the explosions. There's an effect called Deadeye. Time slows down for a moment while aiming, and it cancels all slow time effects like Jet. I don't think you want this because it only lasts for like a moment. It can cancel those effects, and you really don't need time to slow down. Now there's Defiant, and if you have a weapon that only has one piece of ammo in it at a time, it effectively doubles the damage. But you have to find a weapon that has that quality. Like a missile launcher with only one barrel only has one bit of ammo in it. So then you can take advantage from it. But does it spawn on that? You have to, I guess, figure that out really. There's a effect called duelist, which does 25% chance to disarm attackers on a block. Essentially, you have to block, and it only works on human enemies or anybody carrying a weapon like a super mutant. So it's just not that good. Now, there's enraging, which is potentially really good if you like this playstyle. Critical hits cause a target to frenzy. So you frenzy the most powerful guy in a group, and he does all the work for you, and then the other people weaken him. There's an effect, Exterminators, which boost damage against mirelurks and bugs, and that's the same problem as Assassins, because you can do better with another weapon. There's an effect called Frigid, which is 20% chance to freeze an enemy when you block their attack. Freezing does the same thing, but much better. Now, there's an effect called Ghoul Slayer, same problem as all the other against a certain group perks. There's one called Hitman's, which does 10% more damage when looking down the sights. That's just not as big as the other damage bonuses you can get from certain effects. There's one called Hunters, same thing against animals, so only like a Yao Guai would even be a worthy opponent. There's one called Incendiary. You might think in theory that this would be good. Like freezing, like plasma infused, like explosive. It's actually not though, because the effect doesn't stack, and it's a bit of a damage over time type thing. So you're only getting one bonus of 15 points of damage. It does have a cool effect of like a minigun to see the visuals, but it just doesn't help you. Now there is Irradiated, which actually is good. It's very good, in fact, on automatic weapon like a Ripper, or most notably a weapon like a radium rifle, because a radium rifle already has the effect of the irradiated prefix, so you're doubling it, and if you get another perk, you can double the effect to get 200 rads on an enemy per shot. Now, you can quickly kill any 0 rad resistance enemy in this fashion. There's a perk called Kneecapper, which is nice and helpful because you can basically cripple any type of Deathclaw type enemy that comes at you with its legs with an automatic weapon. Lucky works in the same way, I'd say. If you've got Overdrive and a Gatling laser, you'd want Lucky, because then you can double the damage that a critical hit would do, and you'd be doing criticals whenever you want. Mutant Slayer has the same problem as all the other perks like it. Never Ending is kind of a cool one, but it works for different weapons different ways. On a double-barreled shotgun, it can make that weapon much more powerful than it was, but you would want this on weapons that don't have a lot of ammo, and you constantly have to reload them. That would be their weakness. There's actually a unique Gatling laser called Eternus that you can only get in Nuka World, and there's a glitch with fusion cores that it'll give you essentially infinite ammo, but the caveat is that you have to shoot it, and I don't think you can really reload it or pull it away, because then you lose the effect. And it will take some of your charge before it activates from a fusion core. There's one called Nimble, 75% faster movement while aiming, which just really isn't necessary for fighting. There's one called Nocturnal, which is very conditional. Does increasing amounts of damage as the night grows longer and less damage during the day. I don't think this is good because it might do 200 damage at midnight and like 30 damage during daytime. So you're ruining a weapon to get a bonus too. I'd rather just have something consistent that works all the time. You have Penetrating, ignores 30% of the target's DR and energy resistance. No. In practice, the way this works at best is that it can give you like 13% more damage against an enemy by piercing through armor. It doesn't really benefit you that much. You have plasma infused, which has two effects. You can have a bonus of plasma damage on your ballistic weapons, and it makes a nice visual effect. But more significantly, if you kill an enemy, especially with a critical hit, you can get nuclear material off them. As a matter of fact, the aforementioned thing I showed you where you throw grenades at the gunners, you could probably throw plasma grenades and harvest a lot of nuclear material that way. There's an effect called poisoners, which is very awful. You don't really want this because enemies everywhere that are like animals and abominations and stuff, they have poison resistance. You're the only guy that doesn't, and it seems to be one of the only things at this stage in the build that can hold you back. Like, you can get past all of your defenses. So it's something you have to watch out for. But you using it as a weapon, it's just very slow. 3 poison damage per second, and you don't want that. There's Powerful and Mighty, which provides 25% more damage. This is not really that good. I mean, when you have 2-shot, you get at least 50% extra damage. So why settle for something like that? There's Quick Draw, which means you have 25% fewer action points. I can see why people would like this, but I understand that VATS Enhanced does a better effect. There is Rapid, and Rapid will give you 25% faster firing rate. This is mainly good on Elder Maxon's unique Gatling laser Final Judgment, because it has actually significant effect mechanically on the speed of that weapon. And that weapon has charging barrels, so it essentially gives you a rapid firing Gatling laser that uses plasma sniper barrels. Now, there's a perk, Relentless, refills action points on a critical hit. If you have the perk, I think it's Grim Reaper Sprint or something like that, you will get refilled action points pretty consistently anyway. There's a perk called Resilient from Far Harbor that does 150 damage resistance while reloading. Oh, so you're going to be totally protected while you're reloading. What happens when you've done reloading and you're shooting and the enemy comes right up to you and slices you in two? And that's not a big bonus, really. 150% damage resistance. Resolute slows down time momentarily as the last round is chambered. Slowing down time is not going to help you significantly. There's Staggering, which is actually pretty good on some weapons, depends on what you want. On a Flamer it can be good. On a Freeze or a Ripper it can be good. And any automatic weapon, it's quite effective at stun locking an enemy. But my only thing is, if you can get an explosive weapon for an automatic weapon, you wouldn't really need this. It's just not the biggest thing to have, but maybe you'd want to have it on a Ripper where there is no ammo cost. There's one called Stalker, 100% increased VATS accuracy at the cost of 50 more AP. Your VATS accuracy towards the end of the game will be good enough that you don't really need this. There's one called Steadfast, plus 50 damage resistance while aiming. Just not going to affect the game enough to be worthwhile. Troubleshooters, 50% damage against robots, no. And then VATS Enhanced, which gives you greater VATS hit chance, 25% less action point cost. I would say that a lot of people use the Deliverer to great effect. With stealth builds, they can clean out a whole room. And there have been articles written about that, how effective it is. But in this build, I'm dealing with enemies that level with you. So if they're at level 500, they've got enough health pretty much to deal with your sneak attacks. Maybe not with certain sneak attacks, but this isn't the most powerful weapon either. And you're counting on the enemies to be a room full of like lower level human enemies. Now you got Violent, which deals plus 25% damage and limb damage, but has more recoil. Again, 25% damage is not as good as like 60 or 100 extra damage as a percent. Then there's Wounding, which can be really good, and I would recommend it on laser weapons in particular because you can't get explosive. But it is good on anything most of the time.